Hola amigos, welcome to the How to Learn Spanish podcast. My name is Levi Flint. This is episode 16, Consider Studying in a Spanish Immersion School. Before we dive into this episode of the podcast, I just want to let you guys know that I have many different courses over at MexicanFluency.com, specifically designed to help you take your Spanish to the next level. Fluency Hour 1, Fluency Hour 2, and Fluency Hour 3. Make sure to head over to MexicanFluency.com to check them out. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode of the podcast. But first, a quick ad. Okay, guys, welcome back to the How to Learn Spanish podcast. It has been a minute since I've recorded an episode. In fact, it has been 1 year since I recorded an episode of this podcast. Real quick, before we dive into today's episode, Consider Studying in a Spanish Immersion School, I just want to say that the reason for diving back into an episode today, 1 year later, is that initially my plan for this podcast was very simply to make it something like a mini course where it's going to be 12, 13, 14 episodes max, and then I'm just going to stop right there. You know, there's a beginning, there's an end. Provide you guys with the information you need to get started learning Spanish, and then suggest that you join my course over at Fluency Hour and take it from there. However, I kind of miss making these episodes. There was actually a pretty decent listener count for the episodes once I looked at the analytics. And I actually think once I actually sat down and detailed some different episode ideas out, I have a lot more to talk about under the topic of how to learn Spanish. So I think I should just continue. Let's keep it going. And if you guys like the episode, if you want to take it to the next level, head over to MexicanFluency.com, join one of my courses, Fluency Hour courses, or if you want to sign up for a one-on-one Spanish coaching session or sessions, you can do that as well. All right, guys. So in this topic today, as I have already said, we're going to talk about Spanish immersion schools. So what are Spanish immersion schools? So what I mean by Spanish immersion school is essentially going to Mexico or Spain or elsewhere in Latin America and going down for, it could be a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a couple months, whatever you guys want to do. Usually the option is up to you. And there are, let's just take Mexico as my example because that's where I have my experience. When you're in Mexico, there are pretty much in every single state, there's going to be Spanish immersion schools, probably with the exception of a few states, I would imagine. But these schools oftentimes are run by families that have hired, they have an area that's designated for their language school. They've hired a bunch of teachers out, and you pay a very, very reasonable amount of money to be able to go get immersion, Spanish language speaking immersion, 4, 5, 6 hours per day. And oftentimes there are homestays with host families set up along with the school. And it's not obligatory, but you can opt to do that to get even more immersion. So you're going to have your meals with the family. You're going to sleep at the family's house. You're going to really, really live the language. And the whole point of Spanish immersion schools is to accelerate your learning through real immersion. So this is something that I have done in the past. I think it's incredible, and I think there's some really great deals if you're doing it in Mexico or elsewhere in Latin America. Spain, of course, is going to be more expensive. That's just going to be true for anything you're doing in Europe, obviously, right? So that's what it is. Now, my experience with Spanish immersion schools, it was very positive. I started going when I was 21 years old. Long story short, I was in college. It was a friend, guy that lived in my dorm. His dad was friends with a Mexican family that ran a Spanish immersion language school down in Cuernavaca, Mexico, which is just an hour south of Mexico City. So I went with him. I flew into Mexico City, took a bus. We went down to Cuernavaca. And Cuernavaca, over the past 20 years or so, has been a bit of a hotbed for tradition. I don't know if it is right now in 2023, but traditionally, over the past couple decades, a lot of language schools popped up there, namely because of the easy proximity from Mexico City. It's a pretty calm lifestyle, especially compared to Mexico City, relatively affordable, And the weather, it's la ciudad de eterna primavera, so the city of eternal spring. So the weather is pretty good as well, year round. So it's an interesting place. It was a great experience. I stayed with a family at their house for a couple $100 a week. I did their Spanish immersion school. As of today, actually give you guys the name if you're interested. I have not been in touch with them for quite some time, a very long time, but it's SpanishICC.com. Spanish Language and Culture Institute, Instituto de Idioma y Cultura en Cuernavaca. And currently, their intensive course, 5 hours a day, Monday through Friday, runs $350 a week, which in my opinion is an amazing deal. 1 week of Spanish immersion school, you wake up 7, 8 in the morning, you have your breakfast, you get to school by 9, 10, 11, 12, 1. Let's say you're studying from 9 to 2 o'clock every day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, for 1 week. That is a lot of training. That is a lot of immersion. And you're working, typically, you and a teacher. You, maybe 1 or 2 other students and a teacher. And your focus is very, very much on speaking. Very, very much on communication, oral communication. Now, you're going to do some grammar training for sure. You're going to do some pronunciation training, things like that, vocabulary learning, reading. But the main focus is always conversation. So I think that this is this is a shout out to these guys who I would say greatly, greatly paved the way for me. And I hope they're still up and running. I'm assuming since the website is here, you could shoot them an email if you're interested in checking them out. Tell them Levi sent you Levi from Texas sent you. They'll know who I am. But yeah, I would love to get back in touch with them. But great language school. And there's language schools in other states as well, many, many other Mexican states. So if you wanted to be in the Riviera Maya, so down in Cancun area, you could do that there. I know there's tons of schools. There's in Playa del Carmen. I would imagine there's one in Tulum, in Cancun, and probably just all over the region. The negative, what I would tell you guys to take into consideration, the best experiences that I ever had with Spanish immersion schools was definitely in places where English is not the norm. So it's not a super gringo tourist spot. If you're really trying to get the most bang for your buck, you're paying this particular school $350 per week. You want to get the absolute most out of your money and your time. You're not gonna go to Cancun. So many people speak English in Cancun, hotbed for tourism, gringo galore, Europeans all over the place. You want to try to find a place that is safe, that's pretty, that's enjoyable, good weather, and that has a lot of Spanish being spoken. So like the majority of Mexico. But in this case, right? Or if a lot of people like to go to Costa Rica. That's going to be, in my opinion, not the greatest use of money, just because unless it's a more remote place in Costa Rica, not a touristy place, you're going to end up falling into the trap of you're going to speak Spanish all day, you're going to get outside of the school, and you're just going to fall back into English. The goal is let's say you go for 4 weeks. You do the intensive course, 5 hours a day. Spanish, your mind is just flowing with Spanish. You're programming your mind daily. You're working your butt off because it's not easy. By the end of your 5 hours, intensive hours per day, you are beat. So keep this in mind that you're putting in a lot of work. So you want to make sure that that you are definitely speaking Spanish outside, and you're almost never speaking English unless you need to make a call home or something like that. Okay. So keep this in mind, guys. Highly, highly recommended Spanish immersion school. If you can afford it, if the money invested into the school and also the time, if you can do both of these things, you will take your Spanish to another level. I promise. I could go on, and maybe I will in a future episode, helping you guys find some new up-to-date Spanish immersion schools in the United States. That would be a cool episode. I could do a here in 2024, since we're almost there, 2024 version of doing some live research into Spanish immersion schools. Before I get off this episode of the podcast, I just want to let you guys know too, actually, one of the absolute best experiences I ever had with a Spanish immersion language school was, it was like 1 month. I went to Zacatecas and I ended up staying there for a number of months. The first month I was there, I already spoke Spanish at this point, but the first month I was there, I did a month at a language school there. And that was an amazing place because what gringo goes to Zacatecas, Mexico? I remember meeting like one other guy who was there, and that was pretty much it. So places like that, the more off the beaten path you can get, the more Spanish you're going to be speaking, and you're going to be doing your language school, your 3, 4, or 5 hours per day at the school. You get out and you just continue speaking Spanish, and you are blown away how much progress you make in 1 month's time. If you can go for longer, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months time, you're just going to accelerate your path to fluency. And I truly do believe that if you do a immersive language school for 3 months, you might be able to become fluent in the language in that time. No joke. So that's definitely a possibility, okay? If you're doing things right outside of class, you're not speaking too much English, you're studying, you're focusing. Definitely a possibility. So hopefully this motivated some of you guys to look into this, to do some research. And in a future episode, I promise, I think here in 2024, that might be one of the first episodes that I do, is live research into some of these different schools and interesting places, just to give you guys some more ideas. But do your own research. I hope this helped. Keep learning Spanish, guys, and make sure to stay tuned for the next episode. Adios.